Well, good afternoon. I'm Wes Hines. I'm the Nuclear Engineering Department Head here at the University of Tennessee. And welcome to our Nuclear Engineering Colloquium series. Today, as we do at the beginning of every semester, either the first or second seminar is always on safety. And we rotate who comes and speaks to us about safety so that we hear about safety from lots of different angles. It might be someone from environmental and health services here at the campus. I haven't had Scott come in and talk about safety, but Scott, you want to just raise your hand? So this is Scott Emmert. Scott is our departmental safety officer. He helps out in labs. He helps out in a lot of things. Indispensable part of our team. But if you have questions about safety, you can go to Scott. Scott can connect you with the right person, or you can always come to me. And I'll connect you with Scott, who can connect you. No, I try to lead you to the right person too. But Scott, manages our radiological sources, manages some of our nuclear materials, makes sure that we're following the right processes, procedures, policies, and that we have a safe work environment so that everybody gets to go home the same way they came. So today we have Mr. Russell Daniel. He's the Manager of Engineering for Bechtel Nuclear, Security, and Environmental. He was elected Principal Vice President. I better put my glasses on. I knew I wasn't going to make it. I was looking at them earlier. I'm like, where'd I put them? There they are. Okay. He was elected Principal Vice President, Bechtel National, Inc. in 2018. He's a registered professional engineer in industrial engineering. We're right next to our industrial engineering department building. He has a BS in marine engineering from the US Naval Academy and MS in nuclear engineering weapons effects from the Air Force Institute of Technology. Prior to Bechtel, Russell was the technical manager and design authority for the design and construction of the Department of Energy waste treatment plant located at the Hanford site. For the past 25 plus years, Russell has served in multiple engineering management roles across the DOE complex. In addition to executing technical design work on the waste treatment plant, he's been assigned as the engineering division manager and construction engineering manager at the DOE Pantex Site and as a systems engineering manager at the DOE Savannah River Site, as well as DOE Yucca Mountain projects. So he's been at a lot of the major DOE facilities across the complex. In addition to his engineering management experience, he's a certified master black belt, helped establish Six Sigma at Bechtel. His past experience also includes managing the diagnostics program for underground nuclear testing. Sounds pretty cool. While he was stationed at the Field Command Defense Nuclear Agency. He served 10 years in the U.S. Marine Corps. Let's welcome Mr. Russell Daniel.
Check, is it working?
Let me say one more thing. It was also the idea of Russell and Bechtel for us to start our nuclear safety minor, which was actually the most utilized minor last year. It was the first year we offered it, and it was the most utilized minor by our graduating seniors. And also we have a nuclear safety concentration at both the master's and the PhD level. So our partnership with Bechtel has always been very strong, and we look forward to continuing it.
Thank you, and good afternoon. First thing I got to say is this will be the first time I've tried to do one of these with the mask on. Getting back to not talking to a computer, but actually looking at faces, so at least I can look and see who's got the eyes open instead of closed. I can't see who's smiling or laughing, but we'll see how this works. I will tell you right off, if you sit there and listen to me for the next 45 minutes, everybody will have their eyes closed. So I'm hoping that y'all can actually give me some feedback. Don't worry about waiting for questions. Raise your hand if you've got a question, or if you just want to add into the discussion, feel free. What I want to do is, how many of y'all have heard of Bechtel or know who Bechtel is? Okay, so quite a few. So what I want to do first is sort of talk about who Bechtel is so you understand why safety is important to us and how we have to apply it. Then we'll look at it and say, how do you build a safety culture and why does it have to be personal? What are some of the key elements you've got to look at from a safety culture and how you start developing that here as you move forward? Engagement and education, how that plays in. Last one, talking about what are life critical requirements. How do we apply those across Bechtel? And then at the very end, I'll give you one example of how COVID has impacted us at our Vogel site and what that's meant overall from a safety perspective. Bechtel overall has a vision, values, and covenants that we live by. Every one of our employees has a card that we carry with us. We call each other out on it if we're not living by our VV&Cs. Some of the things you'll notice here is that safety and health are part of the key values, as well as people and relationships. One thing you'll see about safety is that it is definitely about people and relationships. Everybody can't look out just for themselves. You've got to look out for your brothers, your sisters, everybody that you're working with as you move forward. So think about that as you're going through these next couple of years from the safety side of the house. How many folks have traveled internationally? Anybody see construction projects internationally? Are they the safest place in the world? (50-50)? I will say I've been in a few places that I've walked in, and when I see folks running up and down 1x6s, pushing wheelbarrows of bricks, hanging off of bamboo scaffolding, it scares me to death. Take that and look at Bechtel. 25,000 projects, 160 countries on all 7 continents. So we've had to apply safety in every country, every continent around the world. So it's a completely different perspective. Sir. Well, I have to go back and pull, but there was a small project we did up there on some of the research sites, things of that nature. But that's one of the smaller areas we've been. 38,000 employees. If you look around, does everybody in this room have the same safety values? Do we all accept the same risk? So how do you develop a safety culture when you've got that distinct difference and that diversity of individuals? Any thoughts? Standardization. And that's one of the things that we've had to do within Bechtel is actually ensure we implement the same program. Doesn't matter where you are, who you are. If you're an employee, if you're a subcontractor, if you're a customer, if you're on our project or on our site, you live by the safety programs we have. Not only different places and different people, within Bechtel we're organized into 4 business units. Nuclear and Security Environmental is the business unit I'm assigned to, does all of the government work, all of our nuclear power work. So everything from a number of projects you'll see coming up with the Department of Energy, Department of Defense, NASA, all our key customers. Energy, just changed the name about 3 months ago from oil, gas, and chemicals. Does all of our liquid natural gas all around the world. Decarbonization, everything you can think of from gas turbines all the way up to the combined cycles. Mining and metals. Working at high altitude is a completely different thing as compared to working at sea level. When you've got to train your employees and actually ensure you have the physical fitness of the employees to actually work at the high altitude, medical facilities, the whole 9 yards we're looking at down in Santiago and from our plant down there in Mining and Metals is a completely different atmosphere than what we have, say, working in NS&E. Our last one there is blocked out on this side. You can pick it up on the other side, infrastructure. Think railways, roadways, airports. How many folks have seen the individuals working on roadways and highways? Do you slow down when you go past them? Everybody? I gotta say, it's one of the most dangerous things that we have, especially when you start thinking about in some of the overseas countries. Workers are sitting there and they've got a very slim barricade between them and the oncoming traffic. And do they go home that night to their family? I can say over the last 2 years, we've actually had a death from one of the workers that stepped across the boundary and was actually hit by a car over in one of our countries overseas. So it's one of the things that becomes personal with the individuals. And you've got to do everything you can to ensure everybody understands the importance of the safety and is also looking out for each other in those situations. Just another quick snapshot of nuclear security and environmental. John Hawanitz is smiling very big today. He just took over as the president of NS&E as of this morning. Barbara Rosinko was our past president who retired. So John is coming on board. You can see the major areas: nuclear, defense, within the, actually I think it's on the next slide. On the defense side of the house, we work chemical demilitarization. From a safety perspective, doing the demilitarization and taking care of our chemical weapons stockpile, reducing that, is some of the most hazardous work you ever have. Doing the engineering for it, the construction for it, operations, you've got to build safety in from day one. So it all gets back into the what is that culture of safety and where are you at. And it just gives the breakdown of those 4 business units now inside of, or business lines inside of our business unit. Nuclear power, pretty evident for what that is, right? All of our work with Vogtle, Natrium, VTR, all of our nuclear power work. Defense and space, ground-based strategic deterrent. Working with Northrop Grumman on that one. Nuclear security operations here at the Y12 plant, Pantex plant, Livermore, work in those areas. And then environmental, all of our cleanup projects. Do you see any consistency between what's the jobs the individuals are doing in those business lines? Safety. Every one of them. It's as I said, it's one of the values that we have from the standpoint of every one of these may have a different customer, may have a different output. Majority of them are all very high hazardous events, high hazardous projects. But safety's got to be the number one factor behind every one of them to make sure we send everybody home at the end of the day. Once again, just stressing the difference of people, places within just the nuclear security and environmental side of the house, the list of projects. See the Livermore, Pantex, Y12, uranium processing facility, once again right here in Oak Ridge. Bechtel plant machinery. We actually design new reactors for the US Navy. Not a bad spot to be if you like nuclear engineering. Nuclear power, fully engaged with the virtual test reactor, Natrium. We're doing the construction down at Vogtle. We've also got, and I believe it's listed here, yes, number 10 just came in, Poland. We're doing a feed study with Westinghouse to do a new AP1000 design for Poland. Defense and space, we mentioned about chemical demilitarization in Pueblo and Bluegrass. But we're also building the Mobile Launcher 2 for NASA down at the Cape. Once again, something completely out of the wheelhouse of everything else. Environmental is our Hanford waste and Savannah River, primarily DOE work for environmental cleanup. So hopefully that just gives you a real brief idea of what Bechtel is, what we do. Sir.
These kind of, I guess, projects or these contracts that Bechtel applies to maybe like every few years or something like that, and you guys get it from, I guess, these companies or countries?
So most of these are long-term contracts that we run and finish the job. Livermore, Pantex Y12, Bechtel plant machinery are more M&O type or management. Well, we'll get a contract for 5 to 10 years and run it for that time, then we'll have to recompete. Mobile launcher, we do the actual design and construction.
Like here you show that you work in United Kingdom and Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
Safety procedures and protocols are different in different countries. So
Yes.
how do you negotiate that?
So from that standpoint, we always work to the safety requirements of the country. We've got our experts in the UK or in Saudi that are actually the experts for the safety requirements ourselves. But no matter what, we implement our same safety culture and safety programs to implement those requirements.
So if I got you correctly, so you tailor your safety program according to the host country where you're working.
Right, according to the requirements that they have. But we will never, from a personal safety aspect, our requirements are a minimum. Anything from the host country would be an addition. But we will require that the whole safety program to meet our standards first, and then the home country. So how do you build a strong safety culture? One of the things, I joined Bechtel in 1998. Early 2000, I went to a safety meeting and had one of our principal vice presidents stand up at the time. And he said, Bechtel is going to have 0 accidents. The whole place just sort of laughed. There's no way a company this large can have 0 accidents, right? How many of y'all think you can have 0 accidents here this year while you're at school? So we all walked out of the room, and at that moment we all decided we had to change the culture within Bechtel. If you look at it, how would you like to be the person that has to walk up to someone, knock on the door, and say, I'm sorry, your son, your daughter, your husband, your wife was killed at work today? If we're saying we're not going to be able to achieve 0 accidents, there's a distinct possibility somebody's not going home tonight. From the time in the Marine Corps, I actually got a phone call and had to go make one of those notifications to a family over Christmas. It was probably the hardest thing I ever did at 25 years old. So it hit me hard whenever somebody said, you can't have 0 accidents. So think about it. Whatever you can do to avoid accidents, you need to work it and work that culture. What's the result of that over the last 20 years? BGI is our overall corporation. All of those people, all of those countries, that's where our total recordable incident rate is compared to industry. Factor of 10 below. So folks ask me, does it make a difference? Absolutely. It's got to start at the top. Our CEO, Brendan Bechtel, his father, Riley, drove safety from the top all the way down. Driven it down into the management side of the house, and we all understand the importance of it. For those numbers, another personal story. Every day in the position I'm at, I get a report of any incident within Bechtel National or within NS&E. Any accident that occurs. What would you consider an accident?
Lost of work time.
Lost work time. Trip to the hospital, okay?
Equipment that breaks.
Equipment that breaks, damaged.
Near misses, so maybe someone can get hurt, but it was close.
Absolutely. What we found is you've got to track it down to the absolute minimum level of incidents being reported. If anybody gets a insect bite at one of our projects, I get an email. If anybody slips, same level fall, I get an email. So it's down to that level of detail you got to be tracking to see what you can do to continually make your workspace more safe for the individuals. What's the most common injury or common accident? Any guesses? Trip. Perfect. What was it? Lifting something too heavy, yes. But that is slips, trips, and falls are the number one issue that we have behind insect bites. But insect bites are only part of the year. Slip, trips, and falls are occurring all the time.
Could I tell you a quick story?
Yep.
Yeah. So, does anybody know who the department head was before me? Actually, tell everybody. So, Lee Dodds. Lee Dodds is probably watching it today. Lee Dodds loves this department more than anything else, and he's probably saying, Heinz is going to tell that story again. So when Lee Dodds worked at Savannah River, and I'm not 100% sure this is true, but no one's ever told me it's not true. You know, you went into Savannah River, and there's a sign there that says, 186 days since lost time of work accident. Yep. So they track that, and they show it to everybody. And I guess Lee, that day, Dr. Dodds was eating lunch, and he bit his tongue. He went back to his desk, and he's working. He's like, man, that thing's just throbbing. I'm going to go home and take some aspirin, just finish the day from home. The next day, 0. Because he bit his tongue.
Yep.
Anyway, that's my favorite lost time at work accident story.
But that is part of what we have to look at as a company, is how do you manage safety? It's a culture, but also how do you manage it? If you're not taking care of your employees, if you don't have the health and safety capability to take care of the employees, first thing you're going to do is go off-site to medical. And you've got to figure out how you do off-site medical, working with that to also bring it back into how it's recorded as a recordable or not and getting notifications. How many folks believe there's slip, trips, and falls are okay if it's just on a wet floor, say right out here? What's the worst thing that could happen to you if you slip on the floor out here?
You could die.
Break a bone? You could die? I had another employee when I was at Pantex. Folks clean the floors every day. It was in a warehouse facility. Lines are marked for where the workspace is versus the hallways. They just mopped the floor area. Being an engineer that was in a hurry to get to lunch, cuts across the corner, steps on a wet spot, slips and falls. Okay, we go over to start trying to figure out what it is. It turns out he breaks his hip, or breaks his leg just below the top of his hip right here. Ambulances show up, everything happens, we get him to the hospital, get him taken care of. Next day I decide I'm going to go down and meet his wife because he's still in the hospital. I walk in to talk to his wife, and she's there broken down, crying. She just found out they nearly lost her husband in surgery. He had a reaction to the anesthesia. So once again, even though you think it may be something that's minor, it's just a broken bone, you never know what's going to happen. So you've always got to go back and do that preparation and planning to make sure you're being as safe as you can in everything that you do. It's not just about construction safety. It's not just about working safety. As Wes mentioned earlier, it's about how do you design safety in. As we're designing plants, we think about what's the safe operating parameters of the plant. How do we design for that? How do you design that it can actually be constructed safely? There are things you can do in the design to make it easier for construction and allow them to construct it safely versus putting them in an awkward situation. Just last night I got an email from our safety group. not here in the US, but in Serbia. We've been clean all year on fatalities. One of our subcontractors was doing a lift of a generator, lifted the generator, slipped, came off, crushed him, and he passed away last night. So once again, it was not a Bechtel employee, it was our subcontractor, but he's on our site. It's our responsibility. We need to make sure that we're being safe and keeping them safe. Yep. Had to send a PDF, so y'all got the secret circles on there before they flipped up on the PowerPoint. Anybody want to take a guess at what some of the safety infractions are here at the site?
The canyon bottom left there, that's rusted away.
Okay. It's a settling can in the tank here in the front. Is actually, yep, not rusted away, not secured, just sitting there.
A couple of folks in that photo that aren't wearing helmets and they're elevated stuff.
Yep. Absolutely. Anytime you're in a construction site, Bechtel job, you have full PPE. Hard-toed shoes, gloves, hard hat. And the safety vest overall, and you get the visitor in the background. Okay. Two things on the ladder since they're both there. One ladder is the wrong ladder to be using on scaffolding, and it's not secured properly, as you mentioned. The one on the right side is tied off properly, but it's too short and doesn't allow you to actually get over the rails and have access onto the scaffold itself. It's great you got the first aid kit there, but is it actually stocked and have everything in it?
Does talking on the phone count as safety breach?
Yes, two pieces of talking on the phone. One is the visitors there on the phone. Second one is the individual there, doesn't really say it, but they're supposed to be the fire watch. Not executing their duties, but actually talking on the phone. It's okay to have plastic gas cans laying around, right? You usually have a secure storage area where you're maintaining all your flammables, not just stacked up under, so yes. I don't think so, but there is not laying underneath, but there is an individual here that's working with a table saw without a hard hat and the correct PPE.
Right next to the gas can. Yeah, left of the gas can.
Yeah.
Got an umbrella over it.
That could be, yeah. He's on a break. Let's see. Yep. The overall clipboard up on the engine, potential combustibles. Also the question becomes, what's from the environmental side? Is it a controlled exhaust, or what do you have for the equipment? One that folks don't catch all the time, overflowing trash bins. Once again, another safety issue that's on the job site. Was that a Six Sigma training as mentioned with the black belt?
I'm just curious, what exactly are they trying to accomplish in this picture?
This was just one that was staged for folks to be able to look, and it's easy to laugh at versus having one that was out there that was a picture of picking on folks from a real one. So I asked them just for an example to be able to talk through different safety issues with the picture. So I was at a Six Sigma training out in Las Vegas, Nevada. Terrible place to be training, right? Especially running about all probabilistics and statistics and roulette and everything else you can think of. But we're enjoying the training class in a hotel conference room, and you look outside. They're repairing the roof on the hotel. Not our contractor, not our hotel. We're just there for training. They had 3 individuals up on the roof that were not tied off. I knew it was a safety culture and things had changed within Bechtel when one of our construction managers got up, left the training, went down and found the manager of the hotel and told him he had an issue. He didn't just tell him that he had people that were not tied off. He said, folks are not tied off. And oh, by the way, when you tell them to tie off, they're going to tell you the following 3 things. And when they tell you that, you need to tell them the following 3 things. Walked through it, it played out exactly as the construction manager said. Lo and behold, that afternoon, they were all tied off up on the roof working. So it gets to be, you're thinking about yourself, you're working through, you're looking out for others. So how do you ensure employees and supervisors know what the program is? First thing out of DCOM, you got to provide the direction. Folks have to know what the safety program is. You have to make sure it's in the policies, procedures, and it's understood by the supervision and the employees. Do y'all have safety programs, safety policies for all the lab work you do here? Do you get to?
If you're new, you'll find out that before you get issued your key to go to a laboratory, you're going to have to go through Scott Emmert and show him that you have every training that's required for every hazard in that laboratory. So if there's a high pressure, helium cylinder in there, you have to have that type of training. All the different types of training that might be a hazard in that laboratory, you need to get signed off on before you get a key. And if you somehow got a key, then you need to go tell Scott, hey, I somehow got this key by mistake. And something else that's important, if you forget your key, you go home and get your key. You don't get your buddy to let you in someplace because he doesn't know if you have the training or not. So we don't share keys. We don't share key cards. We take the responsibility to have those ourselves and make sure you're properly trained to go into those different laboratories.
So with that, that's absolutely the first step, making sure that everyone understands the policies, the programs, the rules for what's going to be there. We actually go through and actually monitor it on every project. So we're actually evaluating how many folks have been trained and not just reading the policies, but actually completed training to understand what do we mean by our safety culture, what are the key things to have in place. Our construction projects, what we found was hands-on is the best. How many folks read a procedure and understand it completely as soon as they read it? How many folks read a procedure and remember it 2 days later? You've always got to make sure you keep them on hand, that you understand where they are. But what we learned was hands-on was the best way to actually implement the training. Connex boxes are actually our training modules. We've got them set up for various scenarios. We can actually bring them on site, run the craft supervision through the training exercises so they get the hands-on training. So think about that from the lab side of the house. If you're reading it, what can you do to prove the hands-on training so that you all understand the hazards and the safety aspects? It's got to be engagement from management. It's one thing to say your craft or your engineers are performing safely. We actually measure on every project the engagement of those senior managers and the managers all the way down. So are they doing focus checks? Are they reviewing job hazard packages? Are they doing toolbox all hands meetings? How is the management engaging with the craft, with the engineers to demonstrate what's expected on the job? Or are they just walking around to actually look and see what the job site is and how the individuals are performing work? So it's that management supervision side of the house has got to be part of the culture. From a DCOM, you got the direction provided by the procedures, competency, you've trained individuals, opportunities, we provide all the opportunity for PPE, all the training aspects, the opportunity to understand what it is. M is motivation. What's the biggest motivation for safety? good health. Emotional health, physical health. You go home at night, you get to come back another day. The motivation is a positive motivation of doing everything you can to ensure the individuals are healthy and can come forward. Within Bechtel, we actually established another set of motivation called our life critical requirements. 10 requirements, doesn't matter who you are, from the senior project director to the craft that just walked on the job yesterday. If you violate a life critical requirement, you're gone. It's how serious we've actually got to be gotten when we're taking and looking at the safety side of the house. And as I mentioned here, it's not just Bechtel employees, it's all our subcontractors that are working on the site with us. Drug and alcohol policy makes sense, right? You don't come to work impaired. Fall protection prevention, we talked about it from the hotel in Las Vegas. Same thing on our job sites. If you're at working height and you're not tied off, management, your other workers find you, it's reported, and congratulations, you just left the site. Confined space entry. This is the tough one. Most of the time, in every case, confined space should be labeled. If you're not fully trained and authorized, you do not go into a confined space. If somebody's in a confined space, is passed out, you're not trained, you're not qualified, hardest thing in the world. You don't go into a confined space. Because the last thing you want to do is have two people now you're pulling out of that confined space. Had an engineer that was working at WTP. No major issues. It was a fairly open area, but it was labeled confined space. He just needed to step across the line just to pick up one piece of equipment that he was looking at. He stepped across, was reported, and he lost his job. So once again, you've got to look at it, you've got to drive the importance of what it is. Lockout, tagout, without a doubt. Big issue in the management and operation of some of these older sites, things that have been built back in the 40s and the 50s. You don't always know what's hot. You don't always know where it's going to. And you start doing demolition or you start doing repair work. You've got to make sure it's locked out, tag out, and only the appropriate folks are actually in the area and working on the equipment. Rigging and lifting. Once again, another key area, as we mentioned, the individual had the fatality here this week. The lifting accident with the generator. You've got to make sure the areas are cleared, secured, and you've got the right rigging equipment. The feeding safety devices. Anybody have saws, circular saws at their house? Drills? Are there safety features on those items? Are they a pain to work with? Never, right? The other thing that we run into is all of a sudden somebody decides, well, it would be much easier if I didn't have this safety feature on the equipment. So they remove the safety feature so that they can handle it one-handed versus two. So once again, life critical requirement. Barricades, hard and soft. If you walk across the barricade, once again, barricades there for a reason, part of our culture. You don't violate barricades. Aerial lifts, scaffolding, pretty straightforward for the lift side of the house. Excavation and trenching. Strict requirements on what's the actual trenching that can be done, how deep it can be, what's the slope of the trench, and can you go in it or not. So once again, that's all laid out, craft or train for it. COVID. Is safety the same now as it was 18 months ago? Vogel units 3 and 4. 9,000 plus workers. How do you social distance with 9,000 workers when you're building a nuclear plant. Safety culture better be tied to it. Supervision better be engaged. And you've got to work everything from your work packages, your design, your construction side of the house so that you can actually get your workforce to accomplish work and still continue to move forward in a safe manner. Used OSHA, CDC, state, and client direction to establish the programs we put in place. As part of that, we actually put an on-site hospital right there outside the gate so that folks could actually be tested, treated, evaluated right there on site. Quarantine program was put in place. 20,000 quarantines. But now think about 20,000 people and doing the contact tracing for those 20,000 people as part of the overall process. Education to the workers. Do we all view COVID the same in the U.S.? It's a completely different perspective for different individuals. Do you wear a mask? Do you not wear a mask? Do you social distance? Do you not? Is it a requirement? Is it directed? So once again, it's providing that education to everyone so that they knew exactly what was expected of them on the site. Had masking in all sites. So now, think about it, you're a construction worker, you're now required to social distance, and you're now required to wear a mask. As supervision, do we have to do anything for those construction workers?
Make sure they can still communicate with one another.
Communication, yes. Anything else? Does the mask make it cooler to work in? Think about down in Georgia, middle of the summer, wearing a mask, potentially being a welder, all of your welding gear. You got to start looking even harder at heat-related injuries or heat-related stress. And then also tracking of all on-site as well as off-site cases. So from the standpoint of being able to say it's not just the workers, but being able to track the cases with their family and understand what that impact could be as you go forward. So once again, without a strict safety culture, without the understanding we have of how it was applied, the training, the management engagement, the motivation side of the house, we never would have been able to continue working in that environment. And so with that, I want to say thank you all for the afternoon and open it up here for a couple of questions at the end.
Questions?
Yep.
Just like the pandemic, which was like, okay, not unexpected, it was expected. But yeah, in case of unexpected natural disasters, do you have like a playbook for the safety protocols in the company?
It's, but believe it or not, it's one of the key things I love about Bechtel. As I mentioned, they are about the people. Natural disasters, things of that nature. Every contract we take on, one of the stipulations we have is that we can pull anybody out of any project, any country, when we want to. If we feel it's unsafe, if we feel there's something coming from a natural disaster, we can pull them out. We don't have to wait for the government to tell us. We don't have to wait for the contractor to tell us. It's our responsibility, and we provide the mechanisms to get our people out. So we're always looking at that. We've got full security systems, security organizations, environmental organizations that are monitoring it, and then getting the information to the projects.
They like to do this too.
Yeah, walk back and forth. I'm betting they do it at least 5 times.
So, we've made a lot of changes with the COVID-19 pandemic, and hopefully in the next year, 2 years, we'll kind of see an end to that. But what do you see as the next big safety challenge for Bechtel?
I still think it's back to the basics. I think it's maintaining that focus with individuals. What we're starting to see is engineers are doing more remote work. Now the question becomes, what's their workstation look like at work? What does their workstation look like, or should I say, what does their bed look like at home? Are you having work-related injuries because of the way somebody's set up at home? It's still maintaining that same basics that we're looking at it, but just looking at it in a different perspective.
So I'm heading this way just because I know it's going to come from this side. Anything else? Okay, let's thank Mr. Daniel one more time.